Guys, welcome back to Coliseum Forum. I'm joined by, again, somebody that probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but we're going to do it anyway because we have to. Master of Horror, Cullen Bunn, everybody. Cullen, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about your upcoming book, The Hexiles, as you can see behind me. Really excited for this book. It feels like it's got a little bit of the X-Men's DNA, a little bit of let's see what else. Maybe a little bit of Constantine. I had a whole list earlier and kind of lost it there for a moment. But tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so the Hexiles comes out later here in October. It is a it's a horror comic, but yeah, you're right. It's got a little bit of superhero in it, maybe. It's about a group of young people who are all called to the funeral of a father they didn't know. And when they all of these young people, they each have sort of a unique superpower. When they get to the funeral of this unknown father, they discover where those powers came from, and they discover that their father, without their knowledge, sold all of their souls, and they are sort of cast together as this ultimate dysfunctional family, trying to keep themselves from being consumed by these infernal forces.
So let's kind of rewind a little bit because I'm a huge fan. I love horror, even though I'm kind of like a wuss when it comes to horror. This is sort of my lane where I can read it and like I'll be able to sleep tonight, maybe because there's some stuff in it. Anyways, where does your interest in horror be? Because you are prolific in horror comics. So where does your interest spur from?
You know, it's always been my favorite genre. Well, I can't even say that. It's long been my favorite genre. I like telling horror stories. I think I think you can tell almost any kind of horror story, or any kind of story within the horror genre. And I kind of feel like the horror genre is sort of this. Uh, it's sort of this sounds weird. I've say it many times. It's sort of a genre of hope, and because even though we're dealing with all these terrible things, these nightmarish scenarios, I like that the characters in these scenarios are kind of fighting, and they don't give up without a fight. So there's something hopeful about that. And in addition, horror is sort of cathartic. It helps me work out some of my own inner demons, and I like all sorts of stories, but horror is something that I tend to come back to again and again.
Well, and to your point that we have seen you step away from horror. You've done things like Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe, which is probably one of my favorite Deadpool stories, except for spoiler alert, the Spider-Man death. Every time I read that, I just get mad at you a little bit. You can't.
You know what's awesome about that is I love how angry people get about that Spider-Man death. Um, which is why when I did that happened in issue 2 of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, which is why when I did Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe again, there's just a whole issue 2 is nothing but spider people getting killed. And
Right.
that was my love letter to all the people who hated that Spider-Man death so much.
So okay, so you're a vengeful creator. Well,
Oh, I'm so petty. I'm so petty and so vengeful. I can't stop myself.
so and then obviously, you worked on the X-Men a little bit. You've done Venom and with Venomverse. You've done, I mean, you've had a pretty prolific career in comics all over the place, but it seems like you always kind of come back to horror at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean it's like I said, it's kind of it's where my heart kind of lies.
Absolutely. And so you know, when people okay, let me think how to ask this question because I know how I would answer it because I do this for a living, right? Like I sell your comics for a living. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, by the way.
When yeah, no, you're thank you for doing this. This is awesome. I can't believe these suckers pay me to do this for a living. It's awesome. Anyways, when people think of Cullen Bunn, what do you think the first comic they'll think of is?
They're either going to think of the Sixth Gun or Harrow County. It's one of those two is t well, or they're going to think of Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. It all depends on the kind of books they gravitate to. You know, if they're real, real Marvel fans, they're probably going to think of Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. But if they're really into a lot of different kinds of books, it's going to be Sixth Gun or Harrow County.
And when you look at, because again, I would saying the word using the word prolific, I think I'm actually using the actual definition of that word when I talk about your career in comics. When you look back on your career in comics, what are you most proud of? Would it be one of those two titles or one of those three titles?
Um, in a lot of ways, I'm just at this point, I'm just proud that I've survived it and that I continue that I'm still able to do it for a living.
Sure,
Um, yeah, it those two books, The Sixth Gun and Harrow County, are the books that if someone were to come up to me and say, you know, give us a book that defines you as a creator, that the book that most clearly defines you, I'm gonna say The Sixth Gun or Harrow County. They were long series, at least as far as you know creator owned books go. The
sure.
Sixth Gun was well over 50 issues if you count spin-off titles. Harrow County was well over 30 issues. And I was able to tell exactly the story I wanted to tell in each of those books. I did exactly what I wanted to do. I ended them where I wanted to end them, and that's not an easy feat, to be
Right.
honest, in
Yeah.
comics. So those two books I'm pretty proud. I mean, I'm proud of a lot of things that I've done, but those two are always, if I'm talking Mount Rushmore, those two are on my Mount Rushmore of comics I created.
Sure.
I don't know what the others are yet.
Well, I mean, I'm listen, I'm sure there's going to be more equivalences of Harrow County, maybe the Hexiles. I'm a big fan of the Hexiles. I'm a huge X-Men guy. I'm a huge horror guy. And I keep going back to the X-Men just because everybody kind of has these unique powers. It always feels like a little bit of Umbrella Academy in the DNA as well. And
Oh yeah,
I'm
I can see that. I can see Umbrella Academy in it for sure. And X-Men, look, I have pitched to Marvel a horror-based X-Men book for years and realized it wasn't going to happen. So that's why I mean, so part of that's in Hexiles now. Some of
sure.
that's in that DNA. The same thing with some stuff I pitched to DC that never happened. Is in the DNA of Hexiles. So yeah, I mean, so those influences are right there on the sleeve.
No, I think this is approachable horror. And one of the things that I'll say this from the retailer standpoint, but also a fan of comics, is that it kind of reaches into a little bit of a bunch of genres, right? So you don't have if you like horror, but you're a little bit of a wuss like me. Hexiles is probably. I mean, there's
There's
some
some
good.
dark moments in it.
There are some dark
Yeah.
moments for sure. But it's still accessible, right? But if you're a fan of horror and you're like, I'm not really a superhero person, I think you could read this and still there's a lot to enjoy there.
Yeah, a lot of what I do, a lot of my favorite types of stories are sort of what I would call crossover crossover horror. Things
Sure.
that if you're into superheroes, you'll dig this book too because it has some of that, some superheroics in it. It definitely has superpowers, although, the nature of those powers is a little different.
Right.
But yeah, it's I kind of think of it as like a bridge. One of the things I've realized over the years is when you say horror, a lot of people get everybody gets their own little interpretation in their mind of what horror means,
Right.
and and especially the people who will say, "Oh, I just don't like horror." That I will bet you, if I were to talk to someone for a little bit, I can find some horror that they'll enjoy, even if they're like, "Oh, I hate horror movies. I can't stand them. Yuck, puh, puh." I guarantee I can find horror they enjoy, and most of the times when they see that, they read it, they watch it or whatever, the reactions. you consider that a horror movie? And I was like, well, yeah, see, that's just it. There's all sorts of different
Right,
flavors out there.
right.
My wife has always said she hates horror, but we watch a lot of horror movies together, and she's like, "Oh, was that a horror movie?" I was like, "Yes, that was a horror movie, but it was your kind of horror movie, so it's okay."
So let's jump back to the Hexiles, which we're here to talk about. Um, you said you'd pitch some ideas to Marvel, you'd pitch some ideas to DC, and so um, you took those ideas and you kind of mashed them together and kind of this is where we're at with Hexiles. Is that where the kind of genesis of this book begins?
Yeah, I mean, it was me trying to, me having a lot of different ideas that I really wanted to explore and play with, and it's like Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet. I'm just like, fine, I'll do it myself, and I just go and just make it happen. Um, yeah, it started with different ideas that I couldn't get off the ground elsewhere, so I took it and made my own story that honestly is better than it would have been anywhere else.
Yeah, that as a retailer, that's something you typically find if somebody has to force like their idea into somebody else's sandbox,
Yeah.
it really, it kind of doesn't. It's a
Yeah.
little bit empty. It's not as good as it could have been. And I
Yeah. So I mean, it was meant to be. It came out in the form it was meant to be. I worked with Joe Picardo on some other projects, and I really liked his artistic flair and his knack for horrific elements. Um, so I was excited to work for him or work with him, and so I contacted him with the idea, and I was like, "What do you think?" And we just kind of ran with it, and then contacted Mad Cave to see if they were willing to give it a shot.
and then obviously I'm sure they were enthusiastic to do a Cullen Bunn book.
Yeah, they were very supportive, and I'm glad that it is coming. I mean, it feels like it's a long time coming. It feels like we've had this book in the works for a long time, so I'm glad to finally see it coming out.
It's really weird, and especially I can't imagine it from your side, but like so part of my job is I actually order the comics at Coliseum Comics, and so for me, we just ordered this yesterday, right? And then 3 to 4 weeks from now, it's going to show up on the shelves, and everybody else is going to get an opportunity to read this thing we're talking about, and I hope everybody comes out to read this thing because it is super cool. Um, but for you as the creator, I mean, in some cases, it's years of development before you get the book finished, right?
Yeah, I mean, some cases, absolutely. There are books that I've done that. I mean, there are books right now that haven't even been announced, scheduled, slated that I wrote years ago that are drawn, that had been drawn years ago that have never hit the slate. That's that's rare, but it happens sometimes. This one has been done for a good long while. Um, so yeah, it's weird when it's weird when I have to play that waiting game a little bit.
So when you say a good long while, can you quantify that for us?
I'd have to look up when I started it, but I've been done with it for 8 months, 6, 8 months. I mean,
Oh wow.
I would have written the last issue, you know, probably 8 months ago. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
every issue of the series is done. It's not like, sometimes you're working on a book and the first issue comes out and I'm writing issue 3 or 4.
Right.
Every issue of this series is in the can. I mean, it's lettered, they're all drawn, lettered, colored, and ready to go. So, and that is not that's not a slow process.
No, absolutely. Well, so going back to that, I mean, every creator has their own sort of process that they work on. Do you prefer it that way where you write out the entire script, get the entire book done, and then release it on the monthly periodical schedule, or do you like to kind of have the release schedule chasing you as you write?
Well, I think it's always better if you can do a book that you you're working so far ahead that you're not rushing to catch up. I mean, that's always nicer. Um, so no, I don't know that I ever like to feel like I'm racing to stay ahead of the schedule. I'd much rather, and I do work on some projects where that's the way it is.
Right.
Either either because of the way the publisher scheduled the project or through my own procrastination or whatever it is. I've been in that situation plenty of times, but the ideal always is to be, you know, I liked it. I would love to be done with a series before an artist even gets started on it. And like done with, or done with an arc or done with an entire series before an artist even gets going. That's the ideal. Um, that wasn't the case with Hexiles, but we were pretty far ahead schedule wise.
Excellent. And so let's pretend I'm really bad at my job. I'm
All
not. I'm
right.
pretty good at it. I think we can ask my boss after the interview. That being said, somebody walks into to Coliseum of Comics in Florida, and they go, "Hey, what's this Hexiles books about? How do I sell it to them?"
It's about a dysfunctional family trying to learn how to get along after they discover that their souls have been sold by their father.
Very relatable, classic story.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can all relate to you don't get to choose your family necessarily
Sure.
and making the best of those kind of situations. Or you can say, look, I don't think it's a problem to say it's a demonic umbrella academy or a demonic X-Men. I mean, all those things are pretty accurate.
There's one twist, and I'm not going to spoil it by talking about it. I'll bug you about it after.
All
That
right.
happens in the second issue that I didn't see coming. I was very
Oh yeah, yeah. The second issue.
yeah yeah
I can't remember. I know you read it in like a the chunk. It is a series that uh we did have to put some like trigger warnings on a few of the issues because of some of the material that's in there. So
oh yeah. Well, I mean that's what I'm. It's
is
great.
that okay? Yeah, I
It
got
lulls
you.
we're with it. It
Yeah,
just lulls you into a sense of security, not security, but like you're like, all right, I'm with it, and then curveball, and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't see that coming. Cullen Bunn, sort of like when
yeah.
you killed Spider-Man. Still mad about that.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to kill him again sometime.
Um, so besides Textiles, what else do you have coming up?
So I'm working on I'm always working on a ton of books.
You have Arkham Horror out right now.
Arkham Horror is coming out right now. I have several unannounced titles that are coming out. I'm doing Gotchaman for a very different. Talk about a book that couldn't be more different from horror titles. I'm working on Gotchaman for Mad Cave, so that's coming out, and then yet then a bunch of creator owned stuff that has not been announced yet. I just It and well, all right. So a couple of months ago, I had a graphic novel come out called Beyond Mortal.
Right.
It came out from Dark Horse. It's a superhero horror graphic novel. Uh, in I think it's either January or February, so still a couple of months off, but it'll start getting talked about soon. I have a book coming out called Jump Scare, which is another superhero horror comic. It is, and it's a great. I say this because we were talking about crossover titles that could cross over, and Jump Scare's a great. Beyond Mortal's a great crossover. If you like superheroes, this is a great crossover in horror, and Jump Scare is going to be another great um, horror superhero crossover. Um, it's set in the Beyond Mortal universe. You don't have to read Beyond Mortal to enjoy Jump Scare. It's very self-contained. It is the most fun I've had writing a comic in years. And that's coming out from Dark Horse in January or February. It hasn't been announced yet, but I've put enough stuff about Jump Scare out there in the world that people will know it's out there. Um, and it is 1000%. Horror fans are gonna, I think, I'll be surprised if horror fans don't go nuts for it. But I think people who just like superheroes in general will also like it, um, whether they like horror or not.
Awesome. So there, here you have it. January, February, we got
I
Jump
think it
Scare
might
coming
be
up.
February, but Jump Scare number one comes out in February, January or February. I can't remember anymore. The schedule kind of shifted a little bit on me. But it's gonna be crazy. It's already, and that's another one. It's already done, and it's been done for a while now. So I'm really anxious. I'm kind of sitting here, anxiously awaiting the arrival of that one.
Well, that's funny. It's my next question. You mentioned, there are these times where you've been done with this book for Hexiles for 8 months, and that book doesn't come out for another 4 weeks from now, right?
Right.
You've got this book coming out in February. That one's in the can. What's it like, the anticipation of waiting, for that to come out and see fan reaction or customer reaction, what that's going to be like?
Working in comics is all about, and one of the things I like about working in comics is it's all about sort of, for me, it's this feeling of gratification. I write a script and I see art coming in, and there's a feeling of gratification that I'm seeing art. And then the next step is that feeling of sort of anticipation. And even if a fan doesn't like me killing Spider-Man, there's sort of the reaction. I like the reaction. I like to hear what people think about books. Um, as long as people aren't horrible human beings about it, it
Sure.
rarely bothers me if someone dislikes something I'm doing, because if they dislike it, it just means they're invested in the stories,
Right.
and that's okay. I find you find it more in superhero stuff. People who just love certain characters, they get very invested in that character, and if you do something that they don't want you to do with that character, they get very sort of angry about it. Um, but that doesn't bother me as long as people aren't making like personal attacks and and things like
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah.
I've had great. I remember years ago I was at a convention and I came into this crowded convention hall, and Ryan Stegman was talking to this big giant of a guy, and Ryan goes, "Hey, Cullen, come here. This guy hates what you're doing with Venom." I was like, "Oh, great, that's awesome. Thanks." Uh, but I had a great conversation with that guy. I was at another convention after my Lobo series with DC came out, and I was walking somewhere in the sky. Another creator goes, "Hey, hey, just so you know, Lobo's looking for you, and he's mad." I was like, "Oh, great. That sounds awesome." So I'm sitting at my table later and I see this big guy dressed as main man Lobo come walking up. And he reached into his back pocket and he had a rolled up copy of Lobo #1. And he said, "I want to talk to you about this." And he slams it down on the table. And but at the end of the day, we had a great conversation about Lobo, what he loved about Lobo, what he hated about my Lobo series. He ended up buying a bunch of books from me. Um, I don't have, look, uh, it's not it's not about making everyone love everything. I mean,
Right.
within it's about getting reaction for me, and
Right.
I enjoy the reaction. I enjoy the I enjoy the conversation, and yeah, people who are engaged, I'm good with that. Like, love it, hate it, that's fine. As long as we can be civil about it, let's talk. And
Right.
then yes, I'm gonna do something terrible to your favorite character again to get revenge, but
Yeah.
then we can talk about that too.
Please leave Peter alone. It's already rough enough.
I can't promise anything, man.
Colin, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's been great talking to you. Hopefully you come back when your next book comes out in February.
Love to, love to, love to. Thanks for having me. Thanks for talking with me.
And that's it, guys. That's Coliseum Forum for this week.